Chapter 2: Which questions to ask and how to ask them logically. Before entering a conversation with another individual with the goal of asking various questions in mind, be sure to first determine which questions you need to ask. Narrow down the list of possible questions to only those questions which are essential to achieving your information goals, and try to also ask only one question at a time. Knowing how to word the necessary questions can also play a vital role in obtaining the pertinent information which you are seeking. Ask only necessary questions. When your goal for a conversation is to gain specific information, it is important that you ask only important questions. When planning the questions that you will ask in a conversation, ask yourself what the possible responses to that question are, and is that information necessary to achieve your information goals. A good way to weed out unnecessary questions is to begin with your information goals and decide which question can best be used to obtain that information. For example, if your information goal is to find out how many car accidents are caused by alcohol intoxication each month, you could first ask how many car accidents were reported last month, and then follow up with the questions, how many of those accidents were related to alcohol consumption? Asking only the necessary questions will help you to be sure you are obtaining only the necessary information as well. If you are not asking unnecessary questions, you should not receive any answers which are irrelevant to obtaining your information goals. Consider this as well. Your time or the other individual's patience may be limited, so you must choose which questions you are going to ask wisely and make the most of the time you are given. If you only have 10 minutes to have a conversation with someone, you need to ask the right questions to gain all necessary information in that time frame. Also, if you are asking dozens of questions, the person you are questioning may become frustrated, annoyed, or bored, and as a result may be unwilling to offer much useful information. By only asking questions that are necessary for achieving your information goals, you will be utilizing your time wisely so that you receive the maximum benefit from the pending conversation. Ask only one question at a time. When you are having a conversation with another individual in which you are asking multiple questions, it is also extremely important that you only ask the individual a single question at a time. If you ask multiple questions at once, you are more likely to annoy or confuse the other person. By asking more than one question at a time, you also run the risk that the person answering your questions may not be able to keep up. If the individual in question cannot keep up with the rate at which you are asking questions, they are more likely to only half answer your questions, or they may omit some answers to your questions to save on time or attempt to keep up. In choosing the necessary questions to ask, you will not feel like you have a tight time restriction, and that will result in you being less likely to rush through the conversation by asking multiple questions at once. To gain the necessary information, take your time in asking questions and be sure that the other individual has fully answered the previous question before you attempt to ask them the next question. Spacing your questions out so that there is ample time between them is beneficial not only in making sure that the other person has finished answering their question, but the moment of silence may be uncomfortable for them, which causes them to continue offering up more information in an attempt to answer your question in a more in-depth manner. Choose your words. The way in which you word something could lead someone's mind to think you mean something completely different from what you originally intended. How many times have you been having a conversation with someone and found that your brain went off in a different direction because something that the other person said was poorly worded? For many of us, this is a fairly common occurrence. Make sure that when you are asking some individuals multiple questions that you choose your wording for these questions carefully. If your questions are poorly worded, there is a higher chance that you will receive incorrect information because the individual in question misunderstood what it was you were really asking. Choosing your words carefully can also help to ensure that your questions probe the other individual to provide adequate and detailed answers. These answers will be great tools in achieving your information goals for the conversation. If you are fairly new to the topic in question, you can easily research common terminology for your topic online or by visiting a library or bookshop. Using terms specific to the topic at hand can help to ensure that no misunderstandings arise, and will also help the other person to appreciate the work which you have already put in as an attempt to prepare for the conversation. Ask follow-up questions. When you are asking specific questions to another individual, it can often be a good idea to have some follow-up questions for the answers that they provide you with. Not all questions can be adequately asked when phrased as a single question, and some of the more lengthy or complex questions may be better off being separated into several smaller or simpler questions. Ask follow-up questions such as, "Where did you learn that?" or "Why did you think that?" These follow-up questions will provide you with more detailed and in-depth answers to the questions which you have asked. Asking follow-up questions can also be a great way for you to clear up any misunderstandings that you may have about an answer which you have already been given. When asking follow-up questions, try to make them relevant to the last question that you asked, and be sure to build on the previously obtained knowledge. Follow-up questions not only help you to obtain the information which you are seeking, but they are also a great way to show the other individual that you are paying attention to their answers. Remember that when gathering quality information about a topic, you might have to dig a little deeper. Keep questions flowing in order. Try to ask your questions in a logical order so that the other individual does not become confused. If you have to backtrack to previous questions or have to keep moving back and forth as the conversation proceeds, the other individual is likely to become confused or irritated, which will likely make them less willing to put thought into the answers which they provide you with. Ensuring that your questions progress in a logical order will allow the other individual to guess which questions they may expect to come next. By being able to guess which questions come next, the other individual will feel more comfortable in talking to and sharing information with you. If the other individual is completely unable to guess what directions your questions are headed in, they may feel like a trap or surprise is coming. And since people rarely like being cornered, the person may become nervous and reserved. Keep it simple. Asking specific questions is a great way to gain specific, useful information from the answers which you are given. Asking complicated or complex questions, however, can have much an opposite result. Sometimes the best way in which to gain the specific answers that you are seeking is to make sure that you are keeping your questions fairly simple. If you overcomplicate your questions or make them too complex, you run the risk of confusing the other individual by making it more difficult to not only understand your question, but by also making it more difficult to answer your question at all. The other individual will likely not be impressed by the complexity of your question, and by making your question more complicated, you may also be obscuring the true question that is being asked. As a general rule, if the other individual has to take more than a single moment to consider what your question means or how to interpret it, they are likely to misunderstand the question and answer it in such a way that may not be particularly useful to you in achieving your information goals. Remember to keep your questions simple so that there are no occurring misunderstandings. Is your question really a question? Asking questions that we already know the answers to is something that almost everyone is guilty of. You may think that it is beneficial to open a conversation with a question that you already know the answer to. However, this is usually not the case. When you ask a question that you already know the answer to, it is easy for the other person to guess that you know the answer and feel like you are trying to be sneaky or trick them. Starting a conversation in such a dishonest way is likely to be extremely counterproductive to your information goals. It is also very easy to allow your emotions or attitude to take over when asking a question which you already know, especially if the other individual does not answer the question exactly as you expect them to. When it comes to asking questions to another individual, be sure to keep in mind that you should avoid asking any questions which you already know the answer to. If you know the answer to a question already, the chances are that it will come out sounding more like an opinion or statement, whether you mean for it to or not. If you already know the answer, but need this question to lead up to another question which you do not know the answer to, try changing the initial question to a statement instead. If you are meaning to ask the question, "Did you call off last Wednesday?" just so that you can ask the follow-up question of, "Why did you call off?" Maybe you could just lead off with the statement, "I know you called off last Wednesday," and then ask the question, "Can you tell me why you called off?" Remember that if your question is not really a question, then it is more likely just a waste of time and may be counterproductive to your information goals. Choose questions that pull from experience. When you are asking other individual questions to gather specific information from their answers, try to ask them questions that they will have to use their personal experience to answer. Questions that require someone to reflect on personal experience to answer have a higher tendency of being true and also more thoughtful. Anyone can easily recite knowledge that they have gained from a book or a class to answer a question, though these answers may be relatively short or simple since it is just written memorization for the person answering the question. Questions that ask about another individual's experience, however, will most likely be answered in a thoughtful and detailed way, which may result in you receiving better answers to achieve your information goals. When another individual must reflect on previous experiences to answer a question, they are likely to feel as though you care about them in a more personal way, or that you genuinely enjoy hearing about their past experiences. When a person enjoys sharing their experiences with you, they will be more willing to put time and thought into answering your questions so that you may more easily achieve your information goals. Choose questions that provoke thought. Some of the best and most effective questions that you can ask other people are those questions which provoke thought. Thought-provoking questions will get the other individual, whom you are questioning, thinking, making them more interested in the topic in question, as well as the discussion which you are a part of, and asking questions in. You will receive better information and answers to your questions from someone who is interested in the conversation which they are a part of. That is why it is so important to begin with a few thought-provoking questions. When you are questioning another individual, you should aim to open up this individual's mind rather than asking questions that narrow the topic down to nothing. Thought-provoking questions may lead the other individual to consider other points that can improve the answer which they provide you with as well. If you ask a simple question, they will surely provide a simple answer. If you ask a thought-provoking question, however, they may provide you with that same answer, but also offer a personal bit of experience or additional comment on their answer as well. Questions that cause an individual to take a moment to think about them are a wonderful way to add depth and substance to a conversation, and will surely add some pizzazz to your list of previously prepared questions. Ask questions logically. When you are asking an individual question to obtain specific information, it may be a good idea to lead off some of your questions with information that you already know. For example, news reporters often ask questions by leading off with previously obtained information first. A news reporter will usually phrase a question as, "We know that blank, so can you tell us how blank will affect blank in the future?" This proves the person whom you are questioning that you are educated on the topic in question and may make them more comfortable talking to you. The individual may provide you with better, more detailed answers if they are comfortable speaking with you. Asking questions logically is also a good tool for explaining your own thinking to the individual in question. This is especially useful if there is a part of the information that you do not fully understand. You may want to say something along the lines of, "I already know blank, but how does that affect blank since blank?" By explaining your thinking out loud, the individual in question will see that you have thoroughly considered this topic and have carefully chosen which questions to ask. Showing that you cared enough about this conversation ahead of time to prepare yourself will make the other individual respect you more and may want them to provide you with better information than if they were under the impression that you barely care about the topic which you are asking them to explain. When you are sharing your previous knowledge about the topic with the individual in question, this may also be a good time to share any sources from which you have obtained your information. The chances are that if the individual knows enough about the topic in question to be providing you with new information, that they are familiar with the other information sources which you may have come across. It is important to have confidence when asking some individual questions concerning a specific topic. Try not to be intimidated. Do not allow yourself to come off as being shy. Show some confidence and be proud that you have put in the research necessary to ask intelligent/informed questions regarding this topic.